My name is Rachel Rofe. I created this show because I wanted to help you see that if you have a choice, you can choose a better life. If you're listening to this podcast, you're in a pretty fortunate position. You have free will, ability to connect to the internet, and access to all kinds of new education. This podcast is meant to help you make the most of your good fortune. We talk with all kinds of people here from all walks of life because I want you to see that no matter what your situation, there's always a way to create a life that you're proud of. Hello! So today's episode is about how to get through a dark period. Now, life is cyclical, and although, the podcast is called A Better Life, and definitely I intend to share things that help us live the highest quality of life possible. But that being said, life has cycles, and so sometimes times are better than other times, and sometimes things just aren't so great. As I mentioned in the podcast with Jordana Jaffe recently, I had recently gone through a pretty dark period where my boyfriend and I had all kinds of things happen to us. It all started early September. We were at the airport moving to our new house, and literally at the airport, we went on our emails on our phone, and we got an email about basically a lawsuit for something that we were actually completely innocent on. It's the craziest story. So since from the second, we're about to move to our new house, we have this lawsuit. We had moving to a brand new house. We had, in this a 2-month period, we had that. We had funerals. We had all kinds of unexpected bills come up, losing money like crazy. In general, just feeling lost, arguments with each other, just so much stuff. I mean, I could go on and on and on about all the things that were happening in this 2-month period. And every single time that I thought I was out of it and all these things were going to stop happening, something else would happen. It was just absolutely crazy. And during the time, a lot of my go-tos just didn't work. So meditation didn't work. I felt completely blocked from my intuition, and it was just really tough. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to get back out of it. And I wanted to make this episode because I know that so many people, when you're going through a hard time, it feels like you're never going to be able to get out of it and feel like you're the only one dealing with it. That's not the case, but of course it's hard to not think that. So I'm making this from a place of thank God I've gotten through that period, and I can look back in retrospect now and see what some of the most beneficial things that helped me get through it are, and then just share them here. So I'm going to go through all of them. You can choose what sounds right to you. My usual style is to give a couple ideas and then you choose what just sounds the best to you, or do all of them because, for me, I needed all of them. So the first thing that really, really helped me was just to be able to get it out. And so I would just email my friends. I'm in a mastermind, and I would just email them and vent everything. I would get it all out. I would say exactly how I'm feeling, what's been bothering me, because it feels so good to just be able to be heard, Even if you're not in a mastermind, ask somebody you can trust if you can just vent to them. Say, I don't need advice. Be very frank about what you want. Sometimes I'll say, I just want to be heard, and then I want you to tell me I'm right or give me sympathy at the end, whatever. Ask for exactly what you want, because just feeling understood, it's probably the best thing that you can do when you're feeling rough. We have a tendency, as I was saying, to feel like we're in it ourselves, and so to have somebody reflect back to you that they understand you're going through a hard time creates that connection and that lack of it just doesn't make you feel so by yourself, really. I don't know any other better way that I can say that. And then you can offer to be that for other people too. If you know someone going through a dark period, I have this with a lot of my friends actually, where they'll text me or email me or something and say they need to vent. And so I'll just ask them and I'll say, how do you want me to listen? Do you want me to just hear you? Do you want me to give you advice? What's going to best support you? Then they'll either call me or text me, vent it all out, and I know they feel great too. So I'm just saying that because I know that I think pretty much anyone feels better when they have somebody that can hear and understand what they're going through. So definitely, most important thing I would say is get it out. Something else that has been extremely helpful, and I know they say that this helps depressed people in general, it's one of the best things for depressed people, is to help somebody else. Because that gives you perspective, especially when you're helping people in a less fortunate position than you are. So when I was going through all this stuff, one of the best things that I did was start volunteering at a homeless shelter. It just felt awesome to be able to support people. Plus, it gave me a new activity, something new to do to get out of my head because, and I think I may have mentioned this on another podcast, or maybe it was when I was being interviewed for a podcast, but people say that sometimes depression is almost a form of like narcissism because you're just in your head so much. And so when you get out of it and you help somebody else, it feels really good. Also, again, you get that perspective. If you can do anything to help other people when you're in this kind of period, do it. I'm not saying that you're gonna like instantly feel better, but I can guarantee that you'll definitely feel better than if you were sitting at home, just feeling upset. The next thing is feel it. So whatever's bothering you, don't try and trick yourself into thinking positively or thinking that you can just change your mindset and it will go away, because that's just really like a short-term band-aid. It's kind of like putting your hand over a fire hose and then as soon as you go like sneeze and you go to cover your nose or something, the water is just going to come pouring out at you. It's the same for your problems, so you've got to be able to release them. You can't just kind of stick them inside and cover yourself up with positivity. So I'm not saying complain for the rest of your life, but often if we allow ourselves to just feel whatever we're feeling, to just get as dark as we need to go, then the feeling passes through. I remember when I was talking with Liz D'Alto on an earlier podcast, she was saying that, and I hear this kind of story all the time, that she just had this moment where she was on the floor bawling, and that was like she needed that. It was very cathartic to be able to get to the next level of her life. If you're feeling like you just have this stuff you need to get out, just cry when you need to cry, get angry when you need to get angry. I think we're just going to keep getting the same lessons until we're able to heal whatever it is that we're working with right now. So feel however you're feeling. The next thing is make changes. So if you're feeling depressed, and there's things that obviously need to change, right? So for me, one of the things I didn't even mention, because there were so many things that I was dealing with, it was just this real lack of clarity about my work. I felt like I was just kind of going all over the place, like straddling between my passions, things like this podcast, and then things that were actually bringing in money, because the podcast it's not really like a financial thing, but I bought into the idea that I could monetize my passions. And maybe that's true for some people. Maybe that will be true for me later on. I don't really know for right now, but this is a whole other podcast with passion and purpose. But the reason why I'm even saying this is because I ended up making the decision, just focus on what brings in the money for now, which is more of my internet marketing stuff, and then spend side time on my passions and just have fun with it and don't try to constrict it to be anything. And so even though that decision wasn't what I had ideally wanted, just having clarity felt so good. It was just so good to have a decision made and move on with it. So same thing for you. If there's things right now in your life that are bringing you down, things you don't really like the circumstance with, make changes for them to improve. So if you need to cut relationships with people, cut relationships. If you need to create boundaries, we had a podcast with Joanna Maya Cohen about boundaries. Listen to that. But just start changing things, because if you keep doing what you have always done, you're going to keep getting what you have, right? So, and I know, the thing is, when you're feeling depressed, it's really easy to just stay in victim mode and feel like everything's happening to you. But I think one of the best things you can do is just start to make changes and get out of it. Another thing is get into nature. As humans, we're meant to go outside. It's how we developed. For years and years and years, we were always outside. Being inside all the time, it's just not natural. And I know now, if you're listening to this in the winter, it's cold. I know right here I'm in Vegas, it's rainy, it's cold, it's snowing in lots of places. But being inside is just not natural. And there's all kinds of benefits from being outside. So sunlight helps your serotonin levels. So I know I said it's raining right now, but there's definitely times when it's sunny. So that's always great to get out in the sun. It helps you feel just more grounded and connected when you're outside in nature. You get reminded of how the big picture of nature works and how the world's just so much bigger than you. And I know for me, I feel way more connected, way more in my intuition when I'm outside too. And that's probably, if you connect with your intuition, you probably would experience that too. And if you listen to Chad Hadsel's podcast about the 4 things that you need to be happy, he had gone for years and years and studied all kinds of personal development, and he realized that happiness for him comes down to 4 things, and one of them was getting out into nature. So I think that's always really, really helpful. Getting out into nature might not be something where you feel amazing forever when you do it, like if you're in a depressed period, but it will definitely make you feel better in that moment. And you can also, when you're out in nature, start to make decisions about how to change things in your circumstance. It's really hard to think about how am I going to change things and make things better when you're coming from this place of just low vibration, feeling really bad. So I feel like getting into nature helps create a more solid starting ground for you to be able to come from a place of good decision making. Another thing is to eat better food. When you're feeling like crap, it's easy to want to eat like crap. It's easy. I know I was just craving like chips. That's kind of my weak thing, chips. But you are what you eat. And when you're eating poor food, when you're eating crappy quality food, you're just going to feel sluggish. You're not going to have a lot of energy. And it's just going to continue the cycle of feeling bad. And so when I started to be more conscious about what I was eating, I would feel way better. So some of the things that I ate to feel better, I know you know for you what you feel good on, but like green smoothies, veggie packed soups. I love those soups. You can go to a health food store and they have like high quality soups that you can go and just in the boxes, and then you can just put it in a pan and heat it up. And I would roast some pine nuts and put them in there and different things, and just delicious. Or yerba mate. All of those things just made me feel amazing. Another thing is look for the lesson. Now, sometimes you can't. Truthfully, sometimes you can't find the lesson. When I was going through all this stuff, I kept asking myself, what is the lesson from this? And it's like, there is no lesson. This just sucks. Sometimes I can find the lesson. So it's worth at least asking yourself, am I learning anything from this? I do believe that anytime we're going through adversity, it's for our highest good. We're going to find out later on why it happened. We're going to see what we were able to do because we went through that hard time. And sometimes you can see it in the moment, sometimes you can't. So just ask yourself, because if you are lucky enough to be able to find the lesson, then you're going to feel a lot more empowered and a lot less like a victim. Another thing is learn something new. So we thrive when we're growing. That's one of our biggest happiness points, is when we're growing and learning new things, we feel better. And if you are going through a dark period, really any time, but especially when you're in this dark period, take some time to learn something new. You're going to experience that novelty, which is great for growth. If you haven't listened to Becca Piastrelli's podcast on play, it was one of the first podcasts. That's a really great one. I know for me, I would go and I would read and I'd listen for other podcasts. I looked for other podcasts like this about how to feel better. And that was always really helpful. And again, just like when we're going through and volunteering, it gets our mind on other things outside of ourselves, learning something new. It's just such a natural way to be happier. It's like a new challenge too. Another thing is get together with friends. So one of the things that was most helpful for me is when I moved to Las Vegas, I found some amazing friends, and I just scheduled time to get together with them. Now, I know when you're not feeling good, it's easy to just want to stay at home and just veg, but I know I felt so nourished every single time I went and hung out with a friend. It didn't necessarily last for weeks every time I went, and I felt really great in that moment, which was awesome. Created some really strong bonds. I was honest that things weren't going so great, so I feel like the relationships were more authentic. It just felt good to, going out with friends was another way to be heard about what was going on, so it kind of fed into that one too. So, that's it. Those are some of the things that helped me. Listen to see if any of those help you. Maybe right now, thankfully, you're not in a dark period. Maybe you just think about this later on, if you happen to go through something later on, which I know that we always will. I just think that these are some of the core things that you can do to be able to lift yourself up and start to feel better. So, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this. I would love to hear if you have any comments. Feel free to leave any on rachelroffe.com or social media. If you have any tips of things that you do to get through a dark period, I would absolutely love to hear them. Feel free to leave a comment. All right, thanks. Have a great day. Thank you so much for listening to A Better Life. You can find all show notes for this episode at rachelroffe.com. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe so you can automatically get access to all new shows. Let's also connect. Just go onto Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram /RachelRoffe, and we can talk there. The opinions of all guests here are their own, and I'm not necessarily endorsing any of them. I do want to give you perspective, though. And always remember, if you have a choice, choose a better